Let's talk about openings. So, if you haven't already seen the opening framework video that I've already done, then please go check it out. I'll put the link in the comments in the description below. Uh, so, for those who have not yet been initiated into a framework, the framework of opening is to basically think about how you can classify the, the multitude of chess openings that's out there. So, at the top level, we talk about open games, semi open games, closed games, and semi closed games. So anything that starts e4, e5 is considered open game. Anything where black responds with other than e5 is called semi open game. So in today's video, I want to focus about some of the most famous, popular semi-open variations or semi-open defenses that typically are seen, in chess. So as you can imagine, e4 is the standard starting move for semi-open, but black prefers not to play e5, right? So what are the reasons for that? Because typically e4, e5 tends to make the game very symmetric. So that's one of the reasons why black has to look at other options other than e5. But not every possible move is going to be right. For example, there are 20 possible responses here, but not every one of them is correct. For example, if you were to move the knight here or here, there are names for it. There are typical opening names for pretty much everything that's been christened in chess. But that's not a very popular semi-open game. You would rather see the knight coming to the center because it breaks the opening rules, right? And you can check out the opening rules as well, where opening goals and rules, and typically how one should start openings. I'll put that link also in the description. Okay, now what are the most popular ones? I think the most popular one is basically playing c5. But before we get there, before we think about most popular, let's think about the logical way in which these things could have evolved. These different openings and defenses could have evolved. So the idea would be like, I don't want to move e5, but this is the most commonly moved pawn. So can I move e6? And yes, this is what turns into what is called the French defense. So the idea being that you still want to control the center, but you do it a move later. So usually when you play e4, e5, the center control comes right away, but in French defense, it comes a little later. So e4, e6 is French. What are the other options? So if I can move the center pawn e6, maybe I can move d6, which is called Pete's defense. And if I play d5, this is the Scandinavian defense. This is actually a little bit aggressive because it comes into a capture right away. If you could move the center pawns, then the last center pawn that's available is c. If you play c6, it's called the Caro-Kann defense. And if you play c5, it's called the Sicilian defense, which is probably the most popular one. What are the other options that I have? Would I move the f pawn? Not really a good idea. I think the f pawn, the h pawn, and the a pawn, if you're moving any of those are what we classify as irregular openings. We're not really going to look into it. But you can definitely move the b and the g pawn, but not two steps, just one step. This is called Owen's defense. And if you move g6, it's called the modern defense. Both of these are hypermodern defenses where black decides not to fight for the center control using pawns, but rather using bishops that develop and tends to control the center. So these are all the various pawn moves in semi-open games. Is there a possibility with knight? Yes, definitely. Knight can come to c6, which is called Nimzowitsch defense, and it can come to e6, which is called Alekhine's defense. Right? So to understand at a deeper level, you have to see the history behind each of these openings, as well as see what is the, how these openings actually help you still follow the goals and rules of opening. You want to still control the center, you want to develop your pieces, but at the same time, there is a certain, unconventionality to these openings. The reason being, the conventional opening has always been e4, e5 at one point of time when these openings evolved, and now even this has become very conventional in many games. But as a chess player, you definitely want to understand each of these openings, and this is something that you can experiment in your games to say that, okay, I'm tired of playing e4, e5, so if my opponent plays e4, maybe I can try the French or the Sicilian, or I could even try some hypermodern openings like Owen's, Modern, Alekhine's, or Nimzowitsch. So if you are already using any of these openings, please leave a comment saying what are the popular openings that you think you're comfortable with. But end of the day, I'd say that every player needs to know which is the opening that really works for them. So when during my playing days, which is a long time back, I played a lot of French. I played a lot of Nimzowitsch against e4, but not so much of e4, e5. Right, so these were my popular ones. Today, if I were to play, I'd probably play more d6. The reason being, d6 tends to convert an open game into a closed game. It can, the opening can transform into a d4 opening, and I'm more comfortable playing the d4 opening, more closed games, which is far more complicated and kind of, helps me get an edge playing more complicated positions. So that's about me. But the things to remember here, the point I'm trying to drive home, the thing that I'd like you to take away is please experiment with these different semi-open games. You cannot control your opponent getting the white pieces. You cannot control the fact that he could start with e4, but then you have it in your hands to decide how you want to take the game forward. Playing e5 could be your choice, but it has its problems. There's only so many things that you can get done with e4, e5. And maybe if you have already faced those problems and you're finding yourself in a particular plateau where you're not able to move your rating up or you're not able to improve your game, then considering semi-open games could be a way in which you can go about it, and nothing like experimentation in chess. So always pick an opening, stick with it for a week, see how that opening plays out for you, see how comfortable you are. Are you getting into positions which gives you, kind of brings out your natural style of play? Or are you getting into positions which makes you very, very uncomfortable? In which case, maybe it's time to move on to another opening. But through this process of trial and error, you will eventually get to a point where you would know exactly which one is your opening, what is it that works out for you. And then you can do a deep dive into it and really, really get good at that opening. I hope this video was helpful. If so, please click on the subscribe button, share the video, and click on the bell icon so that you can see many more such videos. And if you would like me to cover any specific opening that you're interested in, please leave your comments and I'd be happy to do that. Thank you so much.